Hello, hello, and welcome to the Scent Seminar. We're excited to have you join us. I am Reverend Ashley Mayhem, and I serve as the Social Entrepreneurship Program Coordinator for the National Benevolent Association. The MBA is the Health and Social Service General Ministry of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ and is a nonprofit. And we collaborate with leaders and health and social service organizations to strengthen and transform communities through compassion, healing, and justice. The MBA provides education, companionship, inspiration, and organizational and leadership development resources for those health and social service ministries across the life of the church. And all of our work with our partners is grounded in our historic mission of justice and advocacy. We're glad that you have joined us and that you are viewing online. Please note that this is a webinar and it's going to be recorded and available for future viewing on MBA's website, mbacares.org. And also, if it's helpful for you or needed, you can follow along via automated transcription using the AI-generated captions. You can just look for the CC button at the bottom of your window. Again, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the first week of the 2024 Scent Seminar. This is our annual seminar that dives into the world of social entrepreneurship. And this year's theme is Methods to the Madness. We know that social entrepreneurship, starting a social enterprise or a new business venture, can be really messy. But we believe that there are some methods that can kind of help with that madness. And so that was the spirit behind our theme this year. And in just a few moments, I'll be able to introduce you to our panel of subject matter experts who are with us this evening. Each of these guests, if you've registered, they've provided an exclusive recorded workshop, and you should have access to that. You're welcome to view those at your leisure at a time that works for you. But in your registration, we've also been gathering the questions that you provided, and we're really excited to have these subject matter experts, these professionals speak to their experience and some of that wisdom in addressing the questions that you have posed. But before we jump into those questions, I have the pleasure and the joy of introducing our keynote speakers for tonight. We got a tag team. We have Reverend Anthony or Tony Chapman Sr. He is the youngest of 9 siblings, and he grew up on the south side of Chicago, Illinois. Anthony serves as the senior pastor at Community Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas. He received his MDiv from Bright Divinity School in 2019, and he's currently attending Abilene Christian University, where he is studying to receive his master's in marriage and family therapy. He said that his most rewarding experiences in ministry so far have been working with youth and the young adults in his community. And Reverend Chapman is married to Lamitra Curry Chapman, who is also a native of Chicago. She is the oldest of 11 children from a single family home. And when she was a teenager, her father was killed, but her community, though destitute, poured really valuable time and care into her and taught her the importance of mentorship, steadfastness, and commitment. And because of this, she has always felt called to give back. And so she received both her bachelor's and master's degrees from Lewis University in Romeoville, Illinois, and later enrolled in a doctorate program for adult and higher education at Northern Illinois University. In 2015, the couple moved to Fort Worth, Texas, so that Reverend Chapman could pursue his master's in divinity. Lamitra believes that she can make a difference in the world by loving people the way Christ loved the church. And I'd say in true entrepreneurial spirit, she claims, "I can do all things through Christ," as her inspiration. Together, Reverend Tony and Lamitra have 5 children and 5 grandchildren. And not only are they partners in life, but they are also co-directors of the 501c3 Operation Book Bag, which operates in Fort Worth, Texas. I'm especially excited because this couple This duo participated in our 2022 social entrepreneurship cohort, and now currently they serve as MBA Incubate partners. So Chapmans, welcome. Tell us a little bit, a little bit about Operation Book Bag. We'd love to hear some of your journey that you're still on, of what it's been like to launch this social enterprise. I'll turn it over to you. Oh, you're muted.
First, let me say thank you, Ashley, and to NBA across board, those I have met, have not met, but who have inspired our journey thus far, and the support that we receive up front and our back is awesome. So I would say NBA cares. Yes. Operation Book Bag. Operation Book Bag was for me was birthed out of a calling from God, right? Understanding that and Operation Book Bag is just a metaphor for me. It's a metaphor about giving youth and families what they need in a book bag of life to succeed, right? And we have core things that we try to get across, not just to the kids, but also the families. You know, some of the core things that we try to emphasize on is self-esteem, right? We think it's important that self-esteem and living out your authentic self is important to living out God's calling in your life. And on that note, we wanted to say that I think is in scripture it says that Jesus tells his disciples, you would know me, they would know you are my disciples by my love. Everything we do is done out of love of Christ.
Amen. I am an educator in the Fort Worth ISD school district, and we experienced COVID and had to teach online during COVID. And what we realized was there was so much missing, not only from the children, but also from the parents. And so we decided that we needed to create a ministry to combat these issues, to help with the students at school so that they could be successful academically. Well, God called us to the ministry. And so we just began to have programming. My husband then enrolled in the MBA process, and we realized that, well, they helped us realize that this is an entrepreneurship and we could grow it and make it bigger and help more people than the people that were literally just in our little circle. And so MBA has been an intricate part of securing spaces for children and families throughout our endeavor.
Yeah, and one thing we remember when we joined Cent in 2022, it took us to this deconstruction stage, I should say, right? In this, and for me, my deconstruction was I was following God's call, but it was my heartstrings that were being pulled, right? And but doing a nonprofit requires a business side too, right? So and trying to get that balance between God's calling, your heart pulled in that, and how God fits into the business side has been one of deconstruction I had to do, and now we in the reconstruction part and what that might look like, right? And that's when the madness started for me, right? It's, you know, it was like, you know, what you mean, you know, but my heart says we just got to give out our pocket. No, but no, you have to get fundraising. You had to get donors and things like that. So I think when we start to understand that aspect, the first thing we had to do was get nonprofit status, right? And so the madness began again, right? So that idea, but
and if I can be totally honest, I have no idea about business. My heart was in the children. My husband said, baby, we have to do 501c3, we have to do all this stuff. And I'm like, you know what, dude, I'm not doing none of that. I'm serving the children. I don't know nothing about all that stuff you're talking about. And so I began to I wanted to do programming. And as I began to do programming and bring the children in and realize that not only the children came, the parents came. And so creating programming for that. And my husband said, baby, we have to organize this thing. I have no business sense at all. I am a total visionary. And so I was totally in the dark about what this meant to create a business. But all praises to NBA. They focused us. They said, we need to create a board. We need to create a 501c3. We need to create paperwork for federal government, state government. And I literally looked at my husband and I said, I'm not doing it. That's your thing. I'm just not gonna do it. I just want to do programming. And for a minute, that's what I did. I just did the programming. I'm gonna find pizza, I'm gonna find programs, I'm gonna do the teacher thing, and that's what I did. And praise God for Darnell, who was a whip thrower. But
One of the things we really had to figure out was this idea of, for me, the word is intentionality, right?
yes,
Intentionality. We have to have a lot of intentionality about what we do and how we do it, right? And I think the most important thing that helped us was our cohorts, our huddles.
yes,
Right? Where, because even dealing with business budgets and all that, you get headaches, right? And sometimes you feel like you're by yourself. It's at the cohort where we find like-minded people, right? Who are on the same journey, but a different dream that God has given them, but to come together and be each other's strength when things weren't making sense sometimes was the only sense we got, right? Out of that, right? And talking it over with them about how you create your board, right? What was it like? Is it running right? Is it doing right? There was the opportunity for us to sit down as a group and discuss amongst each other and brainstorm amongst each other about, okay, what's the difference between an advisory board? Why do we need an advisory board? And what's a working board? Trying to understand these things and about what it means, and we still pulling from our heart because we still want to do programming, right? But this business aspect has to be done, right? And what that looked like, and to create a budget. I think the most profound thing I heard in our cohorts, it was one of the speakers, and I think he was talking about building a budget. And I had created a budget with all these low numbers, right? And she asked me a question: is that where you see your nonprofit at? Is that really your salary? I said, no. She said, well, why are you not creating a budget that meets your goal and your reality, right? And it's like, stop selling God short, right? And move out on faith, right? Because I know I can get this if I had to take it out of my pocket, right? But it was this piece of intentionality that they gave us, right? You the little birdie and you in the nest, and we about to throw you out. So you're gonna have to flip your wings sooner or later, right? So, but when you think about it like that, it was the push that we need. If we didn't have that group, we might not have had that push. We might have gave up before the time was over, right?
And then in some instances, it was like we faced madness and what do we do with this? What do we do with this? What do we do with that? And NBA pulled together professionals to meet with us on a one-on-one basis to say, okay, Operation Book Bag looks like this. We're gonna formulate this into this, and then we're gonna formulate this into that. And they didn't make us feel like we were dumb, although we felt like we have no idea what is going on, but they provided us with specialized resources to come in and meet with us one-on-one. Not only did they meet with us one-on-one, they literally took every single bullet point and said, this is where you are, this is what's happening right now, this is where we want to go, and this is how we get there. And that's how we solidified where we needed to go and how we needed to grow our business, because neither of us had business sense. We had a desire and a calling from God. We had a vision for a beautiful organization that serviced families. But we didn't know how to do it. But NBA stepped in and every single step of the way, they provided resources that allowed us to grow in our business, to grow us to where we are right now.
I think the biggest takeaway is one that we're still struggling with. Let me say that. And that one is buying all in to your nonprofit, right? Letting go of that security blanket, right? Talking about this idea, walking in faith and understanding that God got you,
Amen.
right? And one thing I'm understanding with all the work behind the scene is that that's a full-time job.
Amen.
Right?
Amen.
And to let go of a full-time job is a big challenge, but it's not nothing that I've never done before. When I think about it, when we packed up and moved from Chicago to Texas, I quit my job. She quit her job. We didn't know what we was going to. We just trust God. We packed up and we moved and didn't know how we was going to get bread and butter, but God worked it out, right? So they reminded me of that, right? And how God can move in what God has called us to do in those moments, right? And I think that's the talk we always have in cohorts, right? What's our struggles? I think sometimes when you by yourself, you don't have nobody to talk those struggles over. And we in a unique position, right? Being a couple in this, right? So this balancing thing we have to do, business, marriage, grandparents, pastor,
Caretaker of the mother,
pastor and first lady,
lady.
All those things in our repertoire, right? And trying to figure out how to juggle and balance, but it also allows you to say, now you got to do priority lists, right?
And if I may be honest, being his wife and him being my pastor and traditional roles that we decided to engage in our marriage and in our home, when we came into the business, there was a lot of headbutting because he had to do business and I wanted to do program and he's pulling me into business. And as my husband, as my leader, as my pastor, I had to say, no, I'm not doing that. I need to do this because the babies need that. And it was a lot of headbutting, y'all. I'm keeping it real. It was a lot of headbutting because we had to then redefine the roles that we would play in Operation Book Bag outside of him being my pastor, him being my husband, him being the leader of our home, because we each had separate roles. And it took a lot for him to pull me into this business piece because I don't want the business piece. I didn't like it. I didn't want it. And so praise God for Ashley and Darnell. And like I said, they were with strugglers. He pulled me in and said, baby, we have to incorporate this thing. And they were patient with me, they worked with me, and in return, I was able to work with my husband and say, okay, we need to bridge this thing. And I have to be honest, that was a feat within itself, literally a feat within itself.
So I think the biggest thing that the takeaway I would get with working with NBA is you have to be this person who's not an oak tree but a palm tree.
Yeah.
And you got to be flexible in this thing, because if I'm an oak tree, I'm a break, right?
Amen.
But and this idea of being a palm tree, because what was true yesterday might not be true today.
Amen.
I got to do something totally different.
Amen.
And that flexibility has to be there. And I think where that comes in handy at right now, even as we embarking on fundraising, right? And what it looked like to create our first fundraiser, what that might look like, right? And what source, and I got to do a fundraiser to do a fundraiser, right? So so to speak, right? But understanding that I have to be flexible and figure this out. I know I want this big thing with this big turnout, but right now I'm just trying to get started, right? So I have to become flexible with what God allowed me to do in the moment, right? And one of the things that NBA and being in Incubate Partners give us is the opportunity to network with other people like
Amen.
us, right?
Mhm.
Not just those who are just starting, but those who we have met along the way who have given us guidance, right? That we still have those numbers that we can call out and say, look, I'm struggling right here. You know, how do I get by this? And right now I'm looking forward to that time where I'm not the bookkeeper, right? I'm not the treasurer. I'm not, we have one, but we redefining our board right now. Let me say, when I say flexible again. So right now we back on redefining our board to a working board, but we also want to advisory, right? So what that might look like for us in touching our community, right? And I think this was birthed out of the idea. Jesus didn't wait for the people to come to him.
He went to them.
He went to the people, right? So, and that's the cause.
And to be totally transparent, it's been very hard because we're used to doing it on our own. And so we use our own checking account, we use our own savings account. And it's been really hard to know how to ask people for money. And so we're learning that aspect. And one of the things we learned in NBA is that we're not asking money for ourselves. We're asking money for our programs and just trying to internalize that piece that we're not begging people because we are working people and we want to get the stuff done to get it for our students, our youth. It's been hard, but we're going into that, and in May we're going to have a major fundraiser. We started out giving 10 book bags. Then we went to 25. This year we gave 150 field book bags to at-risk youth. Not only did we do that for the community, for the Christian church, we supported what the District 2, with book bags for different churches. 25 book bags for different churches, 3 different churches. And that was because we reached out and said, hey, we want to support our people. Can you help us? And people helped us. They literally helped us. And so now we know that we have to ask for the children and internalize that we're not begging. We're asking for assistance for our programs, and our programs are important.
And what my wife just said is the reason why NBA is so important.
Yes.
It helps strengthen our impact on our community. It helps strengthen our belief in what God has called us to do. It gives us that, also give us that accountability that God required of us, right? Right, where you at with meeting this goal? Have you met that goal yet?
Amen.
What's holding you back? How can we help? That's always a question.
Amen.
That comes from NBA. How can we help you in your journey, right? And I think that's the biggest impact that we have. Well, all that they do is important, right? The understanding the business side is important. Understanding what God is calling us and our life is important. But if I had to pick one thing that stands out, because all of them is very, 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 very important, it's when we gather, right? It's in this gathering where we get the most impact, right? It's where we say, man, I'm struggling. Oh, I'm struggling with too. Or, hey, I just been through that. Let me tell you what worked for us. It might not work for you, but it's something you can try, right? And the idea of community knowledge, so to speak, right? That thing when we're talking about building community, what does community knowledge look like, right? In a world where a lot of people want to keep it for themselves and pour it onto it, what do it look like to give it away as Christ would give? What if we walk to Christ with a mason job, ready to pour out what little bit we have in order to watch Christ with?
Amen. And to be totally transparent, in building community and building entrepreneurship is scary. It's so scary. And although it's my husband and I can be honest with him and be vulnerable, to be able to be vulnerable with Ashley and Darnell and say, for real, I'm scared. I don't know what to do. I have this in my hand. Can you help me? And for them to come to say, you okay? We can help you. And not only say we can help you, but say, you have a meeting with this person this month. You have a meeting with that person the next month. You have a meeting with this person the following month. And then you come back to us and you let us know if you are more comfortable in building your business or if you have any other concerns. That was the foundation of knowing that we can actualize our whole dream. We can actualize what God has called us to do in the community. They have been the pillars of Operation Book Bag, and we have been the feeders into the community, the children, and the families. We wanted to affect the children, but the families have come and joined in, and we have been able to not feed the children, but the family as well. And we
So
are grateful to NBL.
I know we only got 30 minutes, so I just want to end with something, right? My 2 minute, my 1 minute pitch, Operation Book Bag, right? A nonprofit. We serve youth 7 to 17. We use core values of culture, history,
Self-esteem.
mental and physical wellness, and life skills. And book bag is just a metaphor. We want everyone to have what they need in their book bag of life, that God can call them to live it out accordingly.
Bold, accomplished, go-getters.
It's in the bag.
It's in the bag. Bold, accomplished, go-getters, bag. And our monthly programs set a standard for us to pitch, for us to put those things in the book bags of the children and the parents. And it's working.
And thank y'all for having us. We
Amen.
appreciate you.
Thank you. I knew y'all would keep it real. That is,
I hope it wasn't too real, but I'm
No.
transparent. I gotta tell it like it is.
No, and
I'm sorry.
No. Part of this was intentional. We wanted, because you, like most folks who approach the social entrepreneurship program, they're led with their heart. They're led by, you know, a sense that God is calling me to do this, or my heart is breaking in response to this need that I see in my community. And we don't realize that just because we want to start a nonprofit or do good, holy work, that it is still a business. And we can share more about that. But I appreciate, you know, Darnell, who is on sabbatical, our program director. He and I do try to cultivate a culture where we can just be real, because it can be kind of messy. And so I thank you for being candid and just like giving a behind the scenes look at what it can look like for folks who feel led with their heart, in entering into a space that feels very unfamiliar, uncomfortable. But to kind of help us in that conversation, we have some of our other experts. I don't know if you feel confident in claiming that title, but we certainly look to you all from your experience. And so I want to give us an opportunity to hear from some of these folks. And I want to invite you each to share your name, your organization, the name of the workshop that you provided to those who have registered, and then a response to the question, what is it about social entrepreneurship that you think is like really beautiful, but can be really, really messy? What's something that either you've experienced or that you witness in those that you support? What is it about social entrepreneurship that's really awesome, but it can be a hot mess sometimes? So we'll start with Mark. Invite you to share a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Ashley. Hello, everybody. My name's Mark Sampson. I am from Rooted Good, and we run the Good Futures Accelerator, which helps churches create and design social enterprises that do three things: fulfill their mission and purpose in new ways, utilize their property, their buildings and land in new ways, and generate new forms of revenue. So the workshop I did was about this, about uses of church buildings and how we can expand our imagination in this incredible asset that many churches have. What do I think about social entrepreneurship that is beautiful but can be really messy and chaotic? I would say, and I think this kind of goes on the back of the keynote, which was wonderful, is collaboration. Like, I think collaboration is one of the key ingredients of a resilient social enterprise, like working with others, both at the team level, both in how you actually get stuff done, but then also operationally, programmatically, working with others. And we're seeing that particularly with churches, that it's the number one ingredient for their success is forming good partnerships with others. Now, as we know, that can be beautiful, but it also can be messy, right? Because you have to be humble, you have to be vulnerable, you have to trust, you have to risk. And all those characteristics are potentially messy, but also, when it works, incredibly beautiful.
Thanks, Mark. Justin.
Hi, I'm Justin Avalar. I am. Can you remind me of all the requirements again of what I'm saying? So,
Yeah. What's your business or organization, and what subject did you speak on?
okay. So, my business is I am a small business and nonprofit lawyer. I'm based in Seattle, but I'm licensed to practice law in Washington and New York. My presentation is on nonprofit formation.
And what do you think is wonderful about the nonprofit world, but can be really messy?
I think the nonprofit world, and especially on a local level, allows people to experiment, and it brings people together to solve problems that people on a larger level, on a state or federal level, can't necessarily see. But because it is largely community driven and based, with a lot of people, a lot of volunteers, it can lead to indecision and become too slow moving for its own good, too indecisive.
That's great. Thanks, Justin. Julie?
I'm Julie Hatron. I am a sole entrepreneur, so I really understand the entrepreneurship aspect of today, and how all of us have big hearts, and then we need to figure out, if we want to be of service, how can we do it well to best serve our communities and really bring joy to this life that we have. My company's called Leadership Savvy, and my presentation was called collaborative partnerships. And so many of us have talked about the importance of partnering and how that can really, so many words come to mind, right? Snowball, amplify, help you bring what you do to the next level. Partnerships make that happen. Because when I think about what's beautiful, but also chaotic, is that the more it snowballs, the more it amplifies, the more chaotic it gets. And so I've been doing this for about 20 years. I started actually working on a White House faith-based and community initiatives capacity building project, where across the nation we were helping faith-based organizations access funding to serve their communities. And so I really appreciate earlier Mark mentioning, how do we use our facilities, right? For example, but there's so much knowledge and heart and goodness that our communities can serve the broader wellness. And so that's the beautiful part. So the hard part has been, how do we create structure and discipline and organization? That stuff that's not so fun, that LeMaitre was talking about. She's like, I don't want to be a part of that. But once you get into it, you see the beauty of it. You see that when you have structure, when you put things on paper, you can check off those boxes. You can figure out, did we meet that goal? Oh, we're short. Okay, let's adjust. Or, ooh, we knocked that out of the park. We can celebrate, right? So yeah, sometimes I think like through the chaos and messiness is where the real outcomes happen. So don't be afraid of it. Lean into them.
Awesome. Thank you. Jason.
Hi, I'm Jason Bricker Thompson. I am with the Cultural Arts Center at Disciples Christian Church, and I spoke to integrated auxiliaries in the church, and I've been involved with several church-related entrepreneurial startups over the years. And I think the most beautiful and also most messy part in my experience are the people and startup boards or volunteers or whoever that group of people is beyond the main facilitator who gets things going, including that person. It can be really beautiful, but also there's a lot of challenges, and hopefully it all just comes together, but it takes some work.
Very true. Chris.
Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Rotolo. My business is an agency called GrowWell, and we work with organizations looking to make a social impact. So, and my subject today is market research. To the question, what about social enterprise do I think is beautiful but can be messy and chaotic? I would tell a story. Yesterday, my partners and I, one of which is my wife, so I see you Chapman's, launched GrowWell, our agency, and we now help all kinds of organizations that are interested in social impact plan, change, and grow against the vision that they have. And this all started out of work that I did with Disciples of Christ, United Church of Canada, and United Church of Christ, where I got the opportunity over about 4 years to help hundreds of ministries develop their theory of change for ministries that they were either planning, looking to change, or looking to scale. Right? And I'd say my experience through all that is really essential, even when you have everybody coming in gung-ho in alignment, is the collaboration piece. Right? The minute that it's time to start articulating and documenting the specifics of the vision, especially in a practical way like the theory of change, one that you can act upon, that building of consensus is the messiest, chaotic thing. We've lost all civility at that point in defense of our ideas, but it's worthwhile, right? If you know the stages of team development, it's just storming, right? You're just going through a natural stage of conflict. And what comes out of that is always like a stronger, heart-led, beautiful idea for ministry or programming.
That's awesome. Thank you. Last but not least, Salvador.
Hi, everyone. My name is Salvador Brigman. I'm the author of Nonprofit Crowdfunding Explained and also the website CrowdCrux. I help people launch traditional and peer-to-peer fundraising campaigns and cut through the middleman to be able to actually raise money from the crowd and do that online. In terms of my workshop is focused on crowdfunding and using this method to be able to raise funds for your nonprofit organization, whether on a platform or doing that there's different ways online with the nonprofit crowdfunding campaign. And in terms of what I think about social entrepreneurship and what's beautiful about that, but also a little bit challenging, what I find beautiful about that is that as a social entrepreneur, you're kind of removing the stigma of asking people or pleading or begging for money. And instead, you're actually creating solutions and you're creating change. And you're organizing people, strategies, and technology in order to have that change occur. And you know what I'm passionate about when it comes to crowdfunding, whether it's an injustice you've experienced or advocacy, or you just want to impact the world for the positive, you can also become a leader in doing that as well and have other people step up and fund your ideas. Now, at the same time, there are challenges as well that come with nonprofits and social entrepreneurship. And to give you a recent example, I recently helped a nonprofit organization raise over $100,000 for an app for meditation and to teach mindfulness and awareness. And one of the biggest struggles they had was adapting to the step-by-step strategy, tactics, marketing, tooting your own horn, and more importantly, using technology. And that's, I think, that the other side of the sword is that if you're going to be doing social entrepreneurship, you have to be willing to lean into new technology, these mindsets, and be willing to be flexible and adaptable.
That's wonderful. And next week we do have a panelist who will be speaking about AI and technology. So tune in for that. To those of you who are viewing live, you are more than welcome to offer your questions as they arise in the comment sections of YouTube or Facebook, wherever you're watching. We have folks behind the scenes who are going to be sending those questions on to us, but we've also, as I said, gathered some of the questions from your registration. And so I'm excited for this conversation. And I also want to point out that I recognize that each of you panelists, you know, your worlds kind of overlap some. So even though there are questions that might be directed toward one or a couple of you, by all means, please feel free to chime in, because I recognize that your experiences, you know, robust, and that you all come to the table here with years of expertise. So I'm going to leverage my I don't know, authority, because I'm moderating here, and I'm going to strategically actually start with a question for Chris here. And that is, my question for you, Chris, is why is market research so important to those who want to start a social enterprise? And I'm placing it at the beginning because I would hope that anyone who's interested in starting something would start with market research. So, yeah.
And you're not placing it at the beginning because you're worried they'll fall asleep at the end, right?
No.
Well, it's a good question, and it's, you know, the answer is unique to the unique nature of what a social enterprise is. Right? There is still the enterprise portion of it, right? The Tony aspect of the Chapmans, where financial sustainability often still matters. But it's more than that, right? We used to talk about the triple bottom line. More recently, it's EDI. But essentially, a social enterprise exists because of a desire for more than financial impact, whether that's social, environmental, spiritual, mental health. We're looking to do more than just dollars and cents, but all of that is measurable. So market research is important because you want to be able to assure that you're having that impact, and you want to continuously be able to improve your ability to deliver it. That assurance of impact is done through things like the same things that would happen for a for-profit business. Is there a product market fit, right? What is the demand? Who is my target market? All of these things matter in our performance against either like our big business SMART goals, our outcomes, which are measures of impact, or our outputs that just reflect the productivity of the work that we're doing. The favorite thing somebody has said in one of the workshops that I did was from a Disciples of Christ leader, and they said, well, numbers isn't just a book in the Bible.
That's funny. Yeah. How do folks go about gathering some of that data, assessing? What are some of your recommendations for, you know, if someone has an idea, and they're getting into that space where it's like, all right, I think I want to do something about this need. I want to respond. I have an idea for something. Where do they even start in learning about the market? What are your recommendations?
That's a rather big question.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of people don't start with like the textbook and the standard marketing and business plan and that sort of thing. A lot of people are driven by heart, or what we might call like anecdotal data. I've seen it for myself. I know that it exists. That can be great for the pilot stage, You know, a lot of grant sources now, we see that there's seed funding and then growth funding. So at that stage, it really is just about validating the opportunity, gathering the data, but nothing beats the textbooks, right? What is, you know, I think, what is the problem that we're solving, and a solid definition of that. Who are we trying to solve it for, and an understanding. So that's like typical like segmentation, targeting, positioning, all of the stuff that goes into a business plan, right? But like a really good place usually is just something like a theory of change illustrated through a logic model. Let's just map out to begin with what we're trying to accomplish, what we need to do that, what inputs are we going to need to perform against that, especially for like community driven opportunities. That I'm almost always a fan in business of ready, fire, aim, right? Let's just get started, because, well, good is the enemy of great, great is the enemy of getting anything done.
Yeah, and I think that you know, oftentimes folks think that this is just a check on the list of things to do, but being informed about your market and what's taking place in your community, and I wouldn't say, I mean, competitors, you know, for business purposes.
Well, competitors for solving the problem. There's any number of ways to solve the problem, and you're one of those ways. So how do you stack up against the others?
Right,
And
right.
benefits from that approach, right?
But this familiarity with the market and having data points to bring to the table that serves a purpose. It's not just a you know, check on the list of things to do. I want to invite Sal and Julie, maybe even Mark. How do you see, and Jason, from your experience with the Cultural Arts Center, how have you seen folks leverage the data that they collect, their understanding the market, to pursue funding opportunities, to engage potential donors? I just want to kind of steer us in the fundraising and development direction.
I wanted to piggyback a little bit off of Chris, the data is really important, but I want folks to remember that you are the experts in your community. You know why there's a need out there. So you're not finding data to validate it. You are producing the data so that others who don't know your community as well, or who maybe hold the pocketbooks, right, can then confidently fund you. And so when we think about gathering data, a lot of times people ask me, how do I build a data research plan? What questions should I be asking? I want to throw that question back at them. What do you need to know? What is important for you to feel like you are making an impact on, and what you're doing is important? And so for example, for the book bags, why are the book bags important? And it goes beyond just receiving a book bag, right? It's about creating that sense of community, having a young person feel like there are others who care about them, being able to walk to school with pride that they have a backpack and that they have the materials and the tools that they need to learn. They're going to school ready. Those are the data points that matter to you and to your community. So we can be very swayed by getting the data that we think funders want. But funders, what I've learned over time, is they see us as the experts. So we need to tell them which data points are important. So I just wanted to make that distinction, that all data is helpful potentially, but we often create data points that are what we think are important to others. Think about, if you're gonna do this mission in this program, what are the data points that are most important to you that will help you track your success? Because that will be that narrative that you will walk into the world with confidence with, to be able to make that pitch to your funders.
That's your case.
Yeah, I love that.
Right? Like that's the body of evidence that when we start operating, we're constantly building. We're talking to like-minded organizations. We can be rather omnivorous about how we gather that. Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's using Ashley's word of confidence. How do you walk in with confidence? It's your story, it's your narrative, it's your community's story, your community's narrative.
So I love that, and I think that's a great perspective. So one that I would add, just in the way that I think about it, is that I love what Chris was saying about this idea of starting small with a pilot and just taking action. So, for example, putting out social media content, you can very easily see how many people are responding to your posts, whether you're putting it out on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook. You can see, do people respond to the actual need? So you have two different segments. One would be people that are actually experiencing the problem, the demographic, and then you have the donors. Are they willing to actually pay in order to help alleviate this problem? So in addition to doing social media, you could also do surveys as well. Google survey is really simple. I think you can even do a small pilot, just trying to raise money for a specific cause and seeing whether that's a GoFundMe campaign or a Facebook fundraiser, and see if you actually get any kind of traction there. And I think more importantly, you need to think about those people that care enough about the demographic where they have empathy with the story and really understand, are they willing to put their money where their mouth is? Are they willing to actually fund an initiative in order to support that? And you only know that once you start talking with them or once you start doing pilots, like Chris was saying.
Fundraising is one of those things that, and I think the Chapmans were kind of speaking to this, that, for our audience sake, a lot of folks are within the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ. And so the impulse, I think, a lot of times is, let's start a ministry, or perhaps they have a ministry that is already existing and functioning or operating within the congregation. And then it kind of becomes its own thing. It, is a little more robust. And we feel very uncomfortable with the idea of fundraising. So how do you, what are some of the points that help convince people or kind of like push them? Lemitra was saying, I had to make this internalized shift, that this is me raising funds and asking for funds for this program. It's not for me. What do you say to those who are just really uncomfortable with the idea of fundraising? I'll open it to the room because I know each of you could probably speak to it. Sure, Chris.
I'll tell you, I might even go bigger picture with this. So in doing a lot of these ministry theories of change, and we're not talking just some small rural ministry, like sometimes we're talking church leadership and stuff like that. I can't tell you how many times someone would come in and say, well, the problem I'm trying to solve is butts and seats. The revenue of my church, my ministry, or whatever is declining. And, there'd be other senior or respected, knowledgeable people that would, and so not just the facilitator that would be like, well, maybe it's something different. Tell us about your community. What are their challenges? And some would stubbornly continue halfway through their theory of change, trying to plan how they're going to change this butts and seats revenue problem. And a lot of work, a lot of time and labor for this isn't working. This doesn't make sense. And usually the biggest realization for these people is it's not butts and seats. It's relevance. I'm not relevant to my community. I'm not doing something for them, right? Like I had one person who asked, we used to go into the library and we used to go into school and we used to get to talk to them. And I don't understand why they won't let us come in and talk about the church with them anymore. Because what are you saying that helps them? You're not centering them. So I've also seen so many people grow. I think of George Bott with the United Church of Canada, who said, I'm trying to serve these 2 or 3 local churches that are, close but distant enough for a drive. I need some technology and I need to figure out how we're going to do that. And now he's when I checked in a year ago, he was serving 200 rural ministries. Now I think it's probably closer to 300, because the problem that he was trying to solve was outside of himself, right? It's like there is a group of people that are being underserved and I want to do something about that, versus I have a problem that I'm trying to solve.
Could I add just one short thing as well when it comes to this? I think it's okay if you're afraid of doing something and you don't want to do it. I think it's completely fine. But what I would say is that if you want to become a leader, I think the onus of being a leader is that you have to be the one to kind of stomach that and to push through. And it's not about you necessarily, but it's about the people that you're serving and becoming a servant leader. In addition, what I'd say to that is it can be quite challenging to ask anyone for money. And I think the better way to reframe that is how can you tell a story that will allow someone to empathize with the demographic? And at the end of that story, they'll also feel a sense of distress at what's happening to those people. And then just give them an option. Hey, if you'd like to make an impact, here's how, and here's the impact that you can make with those funds. That's a much better way than saying we need to raise money, we need funding for this. Stories are kind of a weapon to be able to communicate that information in a very non-invasive way and for people to care at the same time when it comes to that.
For fundraising, I would just remind ourselves that we have a lot of different options when it comes to fundraising. We talk about it as the fundraising pie. So like what percentage of your pie is from individual donors, which percentage of your pie is from corporate sponsors or people who are just looking to sponsor events, what percentage is from a government contract, and that the individual donors and the government contracts are two of our biggest funders. Our foundations and our corporations are actually our smallest funders. Our biggest funding opportunities are individual donors who are leaving legacy gifts. So they're putting you into their will, their bequests. That is where the pie is growing. Everywhere else, the pie has been about the same, right? The other places that are growing, in addition to bequests, are actually crowd fundraising. So I'm really glad to see Salvador here. That's an area of reaching donors that previously may have never considered donating, but because their friends are asking, they're more interested, they're more open to it. It's a personal ask. And then the third area that we're looking at in the sector is donor advised funds. So people with wealth are working with their advisors to figure out where to invest their funds. And if you have a relationship with the donor advisor, they can actually advise them, would you like to put some of your funding to charitable giving? And usually if they know a few organizations, they will recommend the same organizations over and over and over. So that's another little window of growing funding that we're looking at, and we're trying to understand how to collaborate better with donor advised funds to access that money. So I just want to remind ourselves that there are a lot of different ways to do fundraising. The most important thing though, is to choose one or two avenues and just give it a go. I love what Chris said about like ready, fire, aim, because you'll learn and it'll get easier. So
I was hoping someone would bring up diversity of sources, but also diversity of type, right? Let's remember that it's not just wallets out there, it's people. So when we ask, it doesn't just need to be about if you want to make an impact, here's different ways that you can write a check. It can also be, you can volunteer, you can partner. If you're a social enterprise with a retail component, you can sell with us. Like it's about, like, as Salvatore and Julia said, that story, bringing people on board to want to see that change and then telling them how they fit into it.
Yeah, my perspective, but in terms of the research, when we were looking at doing Cultural Arts Center, one of the things we did was reach out to community and do interviews. But what some of those folks became then board members or volunteers, and then those folks became donors or connecting us with foundations. So, getting people interested, I mean, that's a great way to start with, is to ask them about what do they see as the problems in their community. Is this, are we on the right track? What would you suggest? What's your wisdom? And that was really easy to do from my perspective. And then who else, who should I be talking to? Then they'll give you a list of 6 people to reach out to talk to. And so that all kind of lined up for us.
Love it. We have a question from E. Freeman, viewing live, and they said, how do you manage the tension between wanting to be informed versus analysis paralysis? How long is too long to do research? And that is a good question. That is something that we see in our cohorts a lot of times. Folks are just like, let me just learn more. Let me get all the answers before feeling confident and stepping out. Yeah, what are y'all's thoughts?
Well, I'll start. The other question that I hear along those lines is, what do you do with the data that you gathered, right? And so, common question, but I would challenge who's ever asking those questions to look at it a different way. So rather than get the data and collect it all and hoard it, and then ask what to do with it, instead determine what you want to do, and then make decisions about how you're going to gather that data, right? So then, once you've identified what you want to gather, then you can go about identifying what are the best sources from that, which I can draw. So you still want to do it beforehand. It's a lot easier to figure out attendance in a workshop if you know you want to do that before the workshop instead of after the workshop. But then the sources will depend on the type of program, the question that you're asking, etc. But that's why, again, a more strategic approach, like a theory of change or something that's framing your impact, and documenting your activities, then you ask the question of, okay, how do I assure I'm productive here? How do I assure I'm having an impact there? And let those choices drive the data that you're collecting. Because if you're just hoarding data, not only are you, as this person has suggested, maybe doing that instead of doing the work, or maybe you're doing too much of that, but you're also increasing risk because you're holding on to data, and there's always that risk of data leakage. And the more data you have and the more sensitive it is, the more troublesome it can be, and the more work it can be to protect it.
One quick thing that I would say is I think it's kind of a bit of a ratio, specifically when it comes to crowdfunding, is that you're never going to have all the answers. So when you're first getting started, I think of it as a parallel process where two things are happening simultaneously. So maybe 75% of your time you're spending, think of like a pie, right? 75% you're spending teaching, learning, educating, gathering data, and maybe 25% on execution. And as you go down the path, that becomes like 50 and 50, and then it's like 75, and then you're only spending maybe 10% of your time learning because you already have that information in your head. So what I would teach is you're really hitting the ground running from the beginning, but it's maybe just, a couple hours a week or a very small percentage of the pie there.
My quick note is look at what data is already existing out there, because those research projects probably could have done data analysis at scale. So something similar gives you similar data or insight into, say you're doing youth development, or you're looking at health and wellness, or nutrition, or mental health. There's a lot of data out there already. So what can you leverage that's out there already? And then for your personal kind of new data, you might have to scale that back to the resources and the time that you have.
Great. This is a great conversation. All right. So hypothetically, we're the audience, they feel called to respond to this need. They start doing some research. Then folks start doing some asset mapping. And let's say, stereotypically, we got audience members here. They're members of a congregation. They have access to this building space, and that is a significant asset. And so people are starting to explore different ways that they might utilize their space. And so I want to invite us to some of the legal and church property questions. Also, Jason, who offered his workshop on creating an integrated auxiliary. And so we'll speak to that. But our first question in this vein is for those who have access to this building space, and they're trying to look at the legal implications for non-church affiliated programming that's taking place. Justin, do you have wisdom on best practices for folks who are using church space for non-church purposes?
Well, it would depend on how they've structured any agreement with the church. So that would simply be on a case-by-case basis with the organization. I mean, do they so in this instance, who are we concerned with? Are we concerned with the church, or are we concerned with the individuals who are using the space of the church? Because I guess the main concern would be somebody comes in, they slip, they fall, then they sue the organization. So that would be the main thing that would happen is a slip and fall. So you would want to either, if it's just like a one-off thing, the church should just have good liability insurance and maybe have a waiver in place that disclaiming liability if they're renting out the place for events. If it's a longer term, like maybe some sort of lease, they would work it out so that the tenant would take on some sort of liability. The tenant would also have liability for that space, and they would be requiring the tenant to have a liability insurance for those sorts of incidents as well, and then maybe have the list the church as an additional insured. But they're usually very easily solvable problems. But that's the basic thing that you'd be looking out for, sort of slip and falls, accidents. That'd be the main sort of issue that would occur in that sort of scenario.
Lovely. So I know several, and Jason, you're included here, who end up leasing some of this space to other entities, other artists, nonprofits, things like that. And so I invite Jason, Mark, Justin again. What are some of the factors that go into the formula for setting building use fees? So as we're thinking about insurance and utilities, things like that. This is from Kay Gal. Online, what are the best practices for setting up building use fees?
Yeah,
I mean, that's going to. Oh,
it's
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's an important question that we've worked with a number of churches around some of these issues, and it's astonishing actually to understand that quite a few churches out there have actually lost money by leasing out space because they haven't properly understood all of the costs involved and how particularly those costs might change over time. So there's two things to be thoughtful of. One is, I think, really starting right back at the beginning, why are we renting space out, right? Because obviously once you rent space out, you can't use it. Who are we wanting to rent to? Like, what do we want the rental to achieve? Not just in purely economic terms, but in the sense of how does this connect with why we exist as a congregation and how do we be good neighbors in our community? So that, I think, starting with the mission and purpose first is crucial. Then going into the sort of questions, okay, then what kind of demand is there for rental in our area? What's the current pricing that people are expecting to pay per square foot? Whatever, you can talk to commercial real estate agents and others to get that sense. But then crucially, once you find someone, once you think all that through, how do you actually come up with very practical lease agreements? And this is where getting the right people involved, and I think Justin could probably talk about that from a legal perspective, or from any kind of perspective, to think about particularly what needs to be part of that, what true costs are, like who's going to run this, who's going to clean it, how is that going to happen? Is the pastor, if it's a church, happy to be spending sort of 10% of their time managing that relationship? Is it someone else? And then what does that mean going forwards, over for the future? We've come across churches that have set a rental fee for 20 years kind of by accident, which is probably not a great idea if you've ever heard of inflation. So there's all sorts of ways to do it well. We actually have a resource. I'll put it in the chat, and maybe that can get shared on some of the channels, which is called How to Rent Well, which guides churches through the multi-stage process. So you're not one of the ones that ends up losing money in this, which is surprisingly plausible.
So yeah, I mean, I think that really sums it up. I mean, you're going to want a solid commercial lease that's using best practices for the area. And that's going to really, you're going to have, and with that, that's probably going to come with the standard terms for the area, who's paying for what in for other commercial buildings. And that way, if you're working with a broker, you'll know how much other space is going for, so you're not drastically underselling yourself, and just trying to stay with reasonable market rates. You don't have to rent it at market rate. If you want to rent it to artists or people that you think would be very helpful to provide space to. But I think Mark was saying, you don't want to lose money at the same time. So it's an important balance that you have to forecast, and that, working with a broker or having tools of commercial lease, or a lawyer that does commercial leasing would be very helpful in that instance.
Jason, can you speak any about what your experience has been like? Because I know that's closely tied to the work of the Cultural Arts Center.
Yeah, there's a ton of logistics, which I think a lot of them have mentioned already. We were lucky we had a volunteer who was already a commercial real estate agent in our neighborhood who was working with the church before I started, as they thought they were maybe like going to sell the whole property, the whole building. And because he was invested in the community, he's always been helpful with thinking about those kinds of things. For us, there was the big logistics of we actually can't rent commercial space because we don't have a fire alarm system or a sprinkler system in our building. So we can rent for events and programming, but we couldn't rent for a nonprofit to have their office space in our building. So that's one of the things we're working on now with a community block grant, is to get a fire alarm system. So that will open up some of those longer term rental possibilities for us. But that was a big investment. And the real estate agent was just like, well, you capitalize, and from his point of view, it was a lot simpler than church folks who are thinking that's, it's $100,000 investment. It's really a scary thing. But we also do a lot of short-term rentals, more energy, more time, but are more probably financially more beneficial to us and give us more control, and experimenting too. And then we do a sliding scale based on our mission vision. So everyone we work with are nonprofits, but there's nonprofits that come in for various financial abilities. And so we prioritize smaller grassroots groups of color, LGBTQ. So we have our priorities and how we figure out. But we worked with local business school, Case Western Reserve University helped us with some of that market research early on, and pricing and all that kind of stuff to set up on a website, like hourly rates. And then we use those, then we adjust down from there. But we have set fees for our different spaces all over the building. So it was rather complicated and a lot. And then there's booking, and there's all that time invested in all of it. So just pricing that in, as Mark suggests, like that's a big part of it for us. Yeah.
Thank you. Justin, one last legal question. This is from M. Beach. And they said, what are the liabilities of in-home gatherings? My organization doesn't own property. We currently meet in homes or public spaces. What are some of the things that they need to keep in mind as they operate their programming in shared space?
I mean, that's a risk on the homeowner and their personal liability for their homeowner's policy insurance, an umbrella. So if their homeowner's insurance isn't a terribly good policy and somebody is injured, it might not cover it fully or sufficiently. So that's something that they're going to want to check before they have in-home gatherings. Public spaces like libraries or other community centers usually do offer meeting spaces and are free. So those are almost always easy places to access and reserve. And then you have a lot less liability risk with those. But it's definitely something that you want to keep in mind if you're having large gatherings of people that you are not necessarily familiar with, or and I mean, just you do run a risk with any technically run a risk anytime anyone is over at your house that they could hurt themselves and then sue you. It just is. But you multiply that risk when you bring an organization of people over to your house, and it just yeah. So you'll just need to check your insurance policy.
Thank you. E. Freeman asks, when there are churches who are financially stable, they're deciding to partner with nonprofits who are mission aligned at cost for free, and they enter, say, for example, into an MOU, which is Memorandum of Understanding. Are there any tax implications that we should be aware of? Justin or Mark, Jason, actually any of you.
So I don't know if we have a financial consultant on here, but from my experience running federal and government contract programs where there's collaboration between a church and a nonprofit organization, what comes to mind here is that they are both tax exempt organizations. So that's the kind of the first checkbox that went through my head. The other one is, if it's free, there's less of a problem. But if you are charging for organizations to use your space or your equipment, let's say, that the IRS, again, not speaking as an IRS representative or a financial consultant, but as just someone who's run nonprofit programs, to be mindful of unrelated business income tax, that if you start to make too much income that is not specifically to drive your mission, that you may have to pay unrelated business income tax. We used to think of it as a dirty word. It's not. It's basically running a social enterprise that is helping to fund your nonprofit or tax-exempt organization. So that is one note. And while I have the mic and am the step-in kind of financial person, which is not a place that I am comfortable with, but I've had to manage before, is when we are acquiring equipment or furniture or supplies, sometimes we're doing this as a lead organization and asking for funding. Sometimes we're doing this in partnership, but we have to remember to keep the lines very clear. Let's say I'm a theater arts program for the community or for the youth, and I have to acquire a lot of equipment, or we have to redo the stage, and we have a lot of technology, or like maybe lights, it starts to get expensive. Will that be exclusively used for that youth program? Or will the church also use some of that equipment? And again, it's not a like hard and fast, they can never use it, but you need to just make it clear in your documentation that 50% of the time it will go to this 501c3 organization or program, and 50% of the time it'll be used by the church. That way, when you bill for that and you put it in your budget, that the grant will cover 50% of the cost and that the other 50% will be covered by the church, right? So it all kind of comes down to documentation.
I'd just say we get this question all the time about tax. I'd say, firstly, never let the fear of taxation stop you from trying something, right? These things can all be solved, and there are experts to help us solve them. And a lot of the fears that will come up, particularly from a church congregation, aren't actually as legitimate as they feel, right? Like they can feel very worrying. Now, there are a number of different taxes, and the problem or the opportunity of being in America is it's incredibly localized and specific to where you are. So you have to get local support and local help, really crucial in dealing with these things. I'll put a link to an article that tells some stories and unpacks some resources around answering this question, and particularly just helping you get clear in your head, who do we need to talk to, when and why, right? Because if you're going to do something significant, you're going to need to talk to someone, but knowing who, when, and why is kind of, that's what you really need to find out. But whatever you do, don't let it be a reason you don't do something. Oh my goodness, what a terrible reason that would be. But fear not, but also be aware it's something you're going to have to consider.
Great words. let's actually jump back to some of the money talk, and just so our audience knows, next week we do have a couple of CPAs. So all of those tax bookkeeping questions, we're gonna have those for next week. I know we're all very excited about that because I do think that sometimes the financial aspect of social entrepreneurship is one of the scariest. Am I right, Lemitra? All right, so we have several questions around fundraising and development. I love this question. This is from Reverend Jonathan, and they ask, is every conversation a fundraising moment? Sal, Julie, anyone? What are your thoughts?
The answer is yes. So I'm sure the person who asked it knew the answer. And I always remind whoever I'm working with that it takes 6 to 7 or maybe even 10 touch points, interactions, engagements where they hear your name come up, or someone mentions or they see your logo, right? It takes like 6, 7, or even 10 for them to really say, ooh, what's happening over there? Or, oh, wow, they're working on that. That's so cool. Or maybe they'll show up at your event, or they will click that button and make a donation. And so every single touch point matters. And I would say worry less about the frequency. It's like, but have a kind of a regular cadence so that you're reaching out to them. Different platforms are different, different modalities are different. Like you wouldn't want to meet for coffee with someone every week. That would be a little bit much, right? But you might meet with them for coffee twice a year, right? Or you might send them an email once a month. But each of those touch points really matter. So yes, every conversation, every touch point matters.
So, B. Storkinson asked, what are the best practices for crowdfunding online? Big question.
Right. So definitely a solid question there. So the big one is, understanding the type of crowdfunding you want to do, because there are many forms. We think crowdfunding, a lot of times we think GoFundMe, which is like personal charities. You also have nonprofits. So the big two types are traditional crowdfunding campaigns and peer-to-peer fundraising. So I went over all of that in my talk, but I'll just touch on it very lightly here. One is traditional crowdfunding is when you as the nonprofit are having the role of marketing the campaign. You typically have a fundraising goal, and people join in, they donate, they contribute, and they help you get slowly towards that goal over a set period of time. So maybe you're running a campaign for 30 days or 60 days, and over that length of time, they slowly help you get towards that goal or that milestone. Peer-to-peer fundraising is a little bit different, and I would argue it's incredibly powerful, particularly if you have people that are bought into the organization, that are volunteers, that are really willing to toot your horn for you. And the way that's different is that instead of you as the organization marketing the campaign, you play more the role of educator and leader. And the people that are part of your fundraising team go out to their network and they raise money on your behalf. Then all of that funding goes into one big pot. So maybe everyone has a little goal, like $1,000 or $5,000. They go out there, they introduce your nonprofit and cause to their network, and then your funding meter goes up and up as a result. So I'd say best practices, there's so many, but a big one is understanding the types of crowdfunding that are available. And that's going to help a lot of your problems there.
And a follow-up question, this is from Kay Tate. Is crowdfunding specifically the best fundraising option to increase revenue to cover admin costs and hiring personnel? They currently
Great.
for service, but they want to increase revenue. So how might crowdfunding specifically come into play for that specific goal?
So for that specific goal, I'd actually probably push you more to what's called subscription-based crowdfunding, which is maybe when you think of like a monthly giving campaign, where someone, in addition to participating in a specific project or initiative, afterwards you then ask, would you like to join our monthly giving initiative that's going to have this specific impact? One of the challenges in that approach of like, oh, giving money to administration costs is that no one likes to swallow that. Like they don't really like the idea of just giving money to help someone's administration. It's more of thinking about how can that administration then make an ethical impact on the demographic. So by doing this, you're going to have this impact on these people and making sure to really bridge that gap. So I would look into monthly giving, which is super popular and very powerful and creates residual consistent revenue stream. The other would be thinking about the best times of the year to do a campaign. So if you're doing a really big campaign, you want to be doing that likely in November and December, which are the biggest months when it comes to running a more traditional crowdfunding campaign. If you're doing it for a smaller one, maybe you can do that in the spring or going into the summer and have that be like a mini campaign you're doing throughout the year there.
Thank you. Julie.
Yes. So crowd fundraising and the monthly giving are excellent. I'm so glad again, Salvador is here, are excellent strategies because that funding is from an individual donor. And really it has very little strings attached. As long as you're using it towards your mission, that money is very flexible. So yes, it could be used to pay for administrative costs and hiring personnel. So there are two other kind of subtopics I'd like to bring up here is Salvador brought up crowd fundraising, monthly giving, and really what he's telling you is the bottom two tiers of a donor pyramid. So if you want to look at a Google donor pyramid, but there's just different layers of types of donors individual donors that we can acquire. And the first tier are the larger numbers of smaller gifts, right? Lots of people giving small gifts. The next tier would be using that crowd fundraising list, ask people to start giving monthly rather than a one-time gift. So you're moving them up this donor pyramid or ladder, right? It's described as a pyramid because the numbers will get a little smaller. You start with lots of little gifts, then they get bigger gifts, but some people fall to the wayside. And then you have monthly donors and you cultivate that relationship. You let them know all the amazing work and impact you're having. And then suddenly your people may be open to being what we might consider a major donor. Maybe their gift went from $25 to $200 a year to now where they're open to giving $1,000 gift, right? They're starting to get into major donor status. And over time, as they move up this pyramid, those gifts get bigger and bigger, all the way up to those legacy, bequest, donor advised funds that I talked about earlier at the top of the pyramid, where they might be leaving $25,000 or an entire estate to you, right? So that's the donor pyramid. And then the other thing is for the personnel, because you mentioned HR costs. And I just want to remind organizations that as you're writing your program grants, do not forget to work in administrative, personnel, HR, marketing. Like a lot of programs and funders recognize that that is part of the whole picture, that you can't run a solid organization or program without those pieces. So a lot of times we forget to even ask for it, right? Or we're scared to ask for it. But you should have a solid, healthy administrative percentage inside your program grant. You should have personnel, right? Earlier, Anthony mentioned like, oh, I should fund myself and make sure that I can actually, feed myself and my family so that I can do this work, right? That shows a responsible budget being built. So more and more funders are looking for that. They don't want you to only write grants for a program, direct service costs. They also want to see that you're running a healthy organization. So they're going to want to see some administrative costs, some marketing costs, right? Whatever like it takes to your budget should tell a story of how you are operating your organization well.
Man, oh man, it is already 7:30, and I think we got a decent chunk of questions. Certainly a robust conversation. I really appreciate our panel. And what I think I'll do is the questions that were unanswered, some of them will go to next week because there's some overlap in some of the subjects. But I'll see if I can get some written responses from our panel because we are very passionate about ensuring that the content that we are providing you this seminar is relevant to the questions that you have. And they're great questions. And so in kind of closing, because we're already at the end of the time, as kind of a wrap up, I want to invite each of our members of our panel, if there was one little method or one word of hope, instruction, some kind of centering truth that you were to give folks who are contemplating taking that step in launching a social enterprise, what would be the word of wisdom that you would impart those folks with? Chris, you want to close us out or start the close out with your answer?
I would have loved more time for such a powerful question, but I'd say collaboration and consensus, getting that vision documented allows people to see where their role is, including like what it should be versus what it is, because maybe someone wants to step in and fill that gap. You can't do it all by yourself, like recognize what you're again, the Chapmans are a great example of that, right? Recognize what you're able to do and where you need help. When I was running a community ministry for the United Church of Canada here, all I needed to do, like 90% of the challenge is articulating your problem. And the minute that I could say, this is the challenge I'm having, this is what I need, magically materialized. So we have to be willing to, like, it's the storytelling Salvador was talking about, right? We have to be willing to tell people what our obstacles are, and we have to be willing to let go and let other people join us in doing it.
That's good. Mark, what are your words of wisdom?
I'd say, there's a lot of concern, right, in the church, in ministries, in that part of our life together around decline and narratives of loss and change. And I would just say, the Christian faith is rooted in the belief of resurrection, right? So let's not be too afraid of decline and death, because resurrection's coming. And I believe these kind of programs and initiatives are like experiments in resurrection. So let's be bold and try things. Let's just try things, because we believe that even if we can't see it, that new life is coming.
That's good. Justin, what are your words to someone who's thinking about starting something new?
I would say working through and voting through consensus is very important towards building organization. It's hard, and it forces you to understand everyone, and you may not end up fully agreeing, but everyone ends up accepting in the end, and it's a good way to move forward.
Good wisdom. Jason, what are your words of wisdom?
Passion, patience, and perseverance come to mind. Just finding that. I remember when I was first involved with Hiram Farm, which served autistic adults, it's an organic farm. I remember a parent who was one of the original board members just saying, like, this has to work. Like, I thought, oh, hopefully this will work out. And he was like, no, this has to work out, because he had a son on the spectrum. And so that passion, but just then the patience and perseverance over time to work through it is really hard, but important.
Thank you. Julie, what are your sending words?
Yeah, we're all here because we see there's work to be done. We're not afraid of difficulty, and so we can expect there to be chaos. So I just want to give you something practical, that if you feel like you are in a moment of chaos, to think about the 3 Ps that I always think about is, are you all aligned on your purpose? Do you have the right people with you at this particular challenge point? And process. Do you have structure and process in place to help everyone kind of work more efficiently together? So often that one of those are kind of off or haven't been given enough attention. And so I find that when we regroup on the 3 Ps, we can reset our path forward.
It's a good one too. Sal?
Yeah, so I'll say two. One, kind of the wisdom of encouragement would be, maybe it's been a long road to get to where you are right now, and we can't always control our story or the things that have happened to us, but what we can control is the path that we decide to embark on in the future. And I think that going down that path causes you to become the strongest and most powerful version of yourself, and it also allows you to share what you have to give to the world in a much much better way. From more of like a tactical wisdom side, I'd say, all of us nowadays are so obsessed with social media and phones and documenting life and all that stuff. If you put a small ounce of that energy into capturing photos and videos of the people that are working in your organization, the volunteers, the people that you're helping, you can very easily share this and spread this with the world. So don't shy away from documenting that.
That's good. Chapman's, bring us home. Send us out.
Well, mine is find your MBA, find your Danielle, your Ashley, and your Lauren. And if you get those three things in order with the MBA process, you're on it.
Yeah, I co-sign that, but I also want to say, take time to recognize your accomplishment, even in your chaos, right? I think sometimes we don't take time out to see what we have accomplished, and we so focused on the chaos, we don't see what God is bringing us to or brought us through, right?
Amen.
So take time to recognize those things. God brought me through chaos a lot of times in my life, and just remember those times, and I think we can be successful in our entrepreneurship.
Such good words. Well, thank you to this panel. Thank you for the time that you spent in developing your workshops. I know that they are very, very meaningful resources that we use beyond even just this year. And so we're grateful for your time and your thoughtful responses this evening. It was really great to just be in a virtual space of shared, passionate folks who hope to see good in the world, and to have your expertise and your experience kind of help forge a path forward. So thank you to you all. Thank you to our viewers. There's still time to register. If you're watching online and you haven't actually registered, there's still time to do that. We will meet online on MBA's Facebook and YouTube channels, same time, same place next week. On Thursday, September 19th at 6 p.m. Central. But if you haven't registered, you can do that and you can gain access to all of the recorded workshops from our panel this evening and the next week's panel as well. And then for those of you who are in that space where, you're really feeling like you're ready to start something new, the Chapmans are just like the best spokesperson for our sent cohorts. We are getting ready to close out our applications for our 2025 cohort. That's a 12-month program for those who are in that very early idea or launch phase of a social enterprise. And so you're still welcome to apply there. Those applications will close October 1st. And so you can, our marketing will offer a link to those applications. But thank you, everyone. I know we're a few minutes over, but I hope that this was meaningful conversation. I know it was meaningful to lead and to listen, and we will see you this time next week.